Hey guys, and welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm Jack, and I'm here with Liam.
How's it going?
And today we're talking about episode 2 for The Walking Dead season 1, titled Starved for Help. So yeah, obviously the events of episode 1 have been a few months previous, and of course you start off episode 2 with a character called Mark, who obviously we haven't met before, but it's quite obvious that the tolls of the apocalypse are really starting to hit the group now, because they're absolutely desperate for food. They're like hunting for wildlife. And I don't know, I thought it was a really good way to introduce this episode. And you know what? I quite liked Mark as a character. Like, he's in this quite a bit, isn't he? And I don't know why. He just seemed like a very reliable person, very level-headed. I just thought he was a companion for Lee in this section. I don't know about you, mate.
I'd say certainly, yeah, because like obviously, you know, you're kind of like a makeshift dad for Clementine. You've got Carly, who's like a potential love interest, and everyone else in the group is like pretty unhinged, right? Like Lee's male company right there, I think, is either, you know, Duck, who's just like, you know, young, or, you know, he's Duck. You've got Kenny, who's like this really unhinged man, and then Larry, who, you know, in the words of what they potentially say, is a racist old asshole. So it's like, you know, it's nice to start the game off with Lee, where he's got a friend who actually looks like, you know, he's pretty cool and level-headed, and, you know, doesn't want to cause drama.
That's so true, because I'm going back through the group now, and it's like the only one, it's probably like Katja, but I feel like Katja's such a bland character, and she hasn't had so much airtime that you couldn't really put them together in this sequence. So yeah, no, I really did like Mark. But of course you come to this situation where you encounter some schoolboys and their teacher. So the schoolboys are called Ben and Travis, and the teacher's called David. And somehow he's got his leg stuck in what I can only assume is like some sort of air trap. And sod's law, you see a load of zombies start to come over, walking at like 2 miles an hour. Of course, that the game like really, you know, tends to ramp up the tension and make you feel, oh god, you know, make some decisions fast. So yeah, mate, I'll just ask you straight up: did you cut David's leg off straight off the bat, or was you trying to cut the chain or try to cut the tree? Like, what did you do?
I think I tried to cut the chain first, and then when that wasn't working, and then the zombies got close, I was like, okay, I know what the game wants me to do here. So yeah, I went straight for it. And honestly, hats off to Telltale. What a way to start the intro to a game. Chopping and hacking a guy's leg off. Well, like, the music is tense. It's just, it threw us completely in the deep end. You're there trying to, like, you know, shoot a rabbit or whatever, or a bird. And then a second later, you're chopping a guy's leg off. Which I must say, thank God Doug wasn't there to sort of blow your cover.
Holy crap! Run!
I'm pretty sure I just went to cut off his leg because I was thinking, well, I suppose it's because of the Saw films. You know, like how in like Saw 1, you know, the first thing they do is they take the saw and they like try to cut the chain, and ultimately it lends to them cutting their limb off. I was thinking, this guy's a non-playable character, probably gonna bleed out, but I was just thinking, You know what, it's probably best just to get him out so then we can move rather than sort of dilly-dally around.
I love the thought of you not trying any other options, and then
yeah, it's just
maybe Mark being like, oh, don't worry, the chain's like not even like attached to the tree. Or, oh no, there's a release latch, but you're like, no, we're doing this.
Yeah, there's no other way. He has to lose his leg. Obviously, yeah, gets his leg cut off and we start to run away. And then, of course, Travis dies. And what I would say, I know he's like so nitpicky, but you know, what do you expect? But like, the zombies are walking at like 0.1 miles an hour towards you. And Travis has like got his back turned and he turns around, he like, faces a zombie. He's like, ah! Instead of like turning around and bolting it, he just like stays looking at the zombie for it to then like fall onto him and like start eating his neck or whatever. And I find that does happen a little bit throughout this series. Of course, yeah, like the group then make it back to the motel, which of course is still their base. And I don't know, like in the build up to them getting back, there's this bit I really want to point out because I really applaud the effort of the developers here. It's the bit where like Clementine's like kicking a football against a barrel and Lily's sat on top of the camper van, obviously as like a lookout. And like there's an intercut between the football hitting the barrel and it's making like this boom, boom, boom noise. And it's cutting back to Lily's face and she's like looking more and more worried. And it's like building this sense of tension and dread, like is something about to go down here? Of course it is literally just the group coming back from like their little mission earlier on, but I just really love that moment.
Oh, and I was going to say as well, I'm glad you mentioned it because it was really good to build the tension as well. Before we get on the group returning as well, I also have to point out that I really like the atmosphere of the group. You can tell everyone's starving, hungry. There's like the sad violin music that plays throughout this episode, which I really rate. And if I'm being nitpicky again, something that I have to point out is holy fuck is Larry shit at like defending the fence. I don't know if you've seen it, but he's got this rock and he's just really feebly hitting the fence where it's going to do like no effort. He's like a big lad. Throughout this episode, he's described as this absolute kind of, you know, powerhouse. But he's just tapping a fence with a rock and then wiping his brow like, you know, he's just like, you know, like done like the biggest construction job of his life. And I was like, Larry, come on, buddy.
Yeah, no, he's quick to like jump down Lee's throat as well, isn't he? He's like, oh, we can't trust you to do a job. So, fuck off, Larry. You can tell like it's quite a solemn atmosphere, and I think emotions are obviously very emotions are just very high. Like people can flip very easily. But there's actually like something I really want to raise here. So like there's obviously this whole thing with Lily, and she's been, because of like the way they've been running out of food, like she's having to like ration the food that they have, and she's having to choose essentially who gets the food, and people can get pissed off and, you know, potentially favouritism, yada yada yada. But I completely sympathise with Lily here. Like she says at one point that she's the one that's making the decision. Everyone else can like sort of point the finger at her, but at least she's the one that's sort of standing up and like trying to do her best by the group, I suppose. Because I know that she's considered by probably fans as like quite a controversial character, but I think there are some aspects to her where you can sympathise with her. Like she isn't completely like her dad.
No, I do agree. And throughout this episode, Kenny versus Lily will be a common theme. I think in the previous one, it's kind of like a Kenny v Larry thing, especially with that choice you get in the pharmacy. But Larry kind of steps down and he's almost more like a grunt now. And then you've got this whole Lily who steps up to the plate and, you know, is kind of like determined as the leader. And it's such an interesting dynamic because throughout the episode, you'll see that Lily strongly thinks they're safe at the motel. Everything's fine. Kenny's like wanting to get on a boat and leave in the RV. And yeah, like it creates this really interesting dynamic where Lee will very much be like torn between both. And then as a player, you get to decide which one you prefer, whether you want to side with someone, whether you want to kind of be wishy-washy and try and stand on the fence. But yeah, no, super interesting. And I really like Lily's speech as well, like you mentioned. It is like a really tough job, and she has every right to kind of be angry the fact that you're bringing in, like as she puts it, more mouths to feed in this group to do this food distribution task. You know, very not an easy feat whatsoever. So yeah, Jack, I mean, did you want to talk about the food distribution?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I can't remember like who I gave the food to. Obviously, I remember in the last episode, I definitely gave food the kids, Duck and Clem. But honestly, if I were to do it this time, I'd probably give a bit of food to Mark, one to Lily, one to Katja, and one to Kenny. Certainly not Larry. And I probably wouldn't have kept something for myself because I think I did that in the last episode as well. But
Scumbagly, just energy bars mine. The crackers are literally don't even distribute anything. Eat all the food for yourself. Like, 2 crackers, an apple, and beef jerky for me.
Yeah.
I think for me, I definitely gave one to Clem. I gave one to Lily and one to Duck because I wanted to keep the peace between the two sides. Right. So I definitely wanted to be wishy-washy, and I was like, when I went to Kenny, it was like, feed my boy, and when I went to Lily, she was like, I don't want your food, but I did anyway. I force gave it. I don't really remember who I gave it to the last person. I know it wasn't Mark because he had a go at me later. I know it wasn't Ben because I didn't want to anger the group by giving it to the new person.
Yeah.
I think I might have given it to Carly because I know, well, A, I'm a simp for her, but B, she will accept the apple. So I think I gave her the apple. But yeah, but I might be unsure on that one. But either way, it still results in Larry being fuming at me. And like you say, so hypocritical. He's there like, oh yeah, Lily's got to make tough decisions. And when you do it once, he's like, why don't you give me food? You're going to get kicked out of the group if you carry on like this. It's like, mate, chill the fuck out.
No, it's funny. Like the playthrough that I was watching as well, the person actually gave food to Larry. He didn't say thanks or anything. He just took the food and just like carried on. I think he said something, but it certainly wasn't, something nice. And then he just carried on with the fence. I'm glad that I didn't give mine to Larry in the initial playthrough. Like it was definitely just a very hate relationship between my version of Lee and Larry. But of course, yeah. So following on from this, we see that David has turned into a zombie. And he starts to attack Katja and then Lee when he goes over to help. Like a QTE scene plays out, doesn't it? Not many people seem to rush over, considering there's like 10 people in that space. They do take their time to come over. I think Larry comes over. Who else? Was it Lily or Kenny or like someone come over anyway? And ultimately you kill him. I suppose an interesting bit about this is that Ben gives this sort of revelation, doesn't he? Where he says that it's not necessarily to do with a bite, it's not an infection. Just regardless, when you die, you will become a walker. So obviously, mate, as someone that watched the TV series, was it the exact same in that, or is this just unique to the game?
Nah, so this is the lore of the TV show. So The Walking Dead has a rule where everyone on the planet is infected, and when you die, you come back as a walker no matter what. So it steers away from the classic bite does it. And obviously a bite will get you there anyway, because it essentially raises your fever and kills you off. But you can just die from a heart attack and you're dead. And then because of the infection, your brain revives in zombie mode. So yeah, really interesting. And I want to say as well, for this whole David turn sequence, I really like the fact that the jump scare kind of happens mid QTE on a dialogue with Katja, where it's chilled out, because it catches you so off guard. And I just thought it was really well done. I quite like the fact there's variety as well if it's Travis that dies. I can't quite remember, because I know if you don't chop David's leg off, you get Travis instead, but I can't remember what it is that kills Travis, whether he gets bit on the way back or something. Yeah, very good scene. Also, absolute Benny Hill moment from everyone missing with the axe to kill David, saving you. I think in the end, after 4 attempts, Carly got a gun out and was like, I'll just do it myself.
I suppose the next major thing is obviously then meet 2 more characters called Danny and Andy St. John. And there's obviously a bit of a standoff, isn't there, which I think is natural at this point. I think people in these survival situations tend to group off. And but they quickly come to some sort of arrangement where they agree in exchange for gas, they will give them food from their dairy farm. And I think regardless what you pick here, you always end up going to the dairy farm and walking there.
I just want to interject actually, and I put this in earlier, but did you know a little fun fact that if you save Doug instead of Carly in episode 1, you see the St. John's coming rather than the St. John's giving you the jump and saying hi? Because Doug builds a tripwire system in front of the motel with like a bell on it.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, and you could choose to hide, before the St. John's get there, and then you have the conversation where they don't see you, and then you kind of like approach them first. Very much like, and you will see that throughout the episode, Doug versus Carly is very much, the choice boils down to, do you want a love story, or do you want a guy who has a few cool gadgets? And then, he'll use a few gadgets throughout this episode, which you will see. But yeah, no, just I thought, might be an interesting fact if you didn't know that one.
Oh yeah, no, that is good. But yeah, obviously, mate, like, you know how I touched on episode 1 about, like, meeting Herschel and Sean, and like, it's very, very quick to trust them, aren't you? When you met this at John's, was you sort of thinking to yourself, oh, this is brilliant? Like, we're going to get some food, we've met some more characters, like, what was your thoughts at that bit?
Skeptical, but, I didn't want to hold any grudges straight away, but I was very much like, arm's distance, but I didn't want to make any conclusions throughout this episode. I know a lot of people clocked on what was going on from the bat, but for me, I was very much like, you know what, I'm not going to jump at anything, I'm going to let the story surprise me, come at me. But yeah, certainly interesting walking to this area. I was certainly intrigued to see what the farm was like.
Oh yeah, and you know what? When you get to the farm, and it's actually something I'm going to comment on quickly. I think the pacing at this point of the game is actually very good in terms of the locations that you've moved from. You've each had time. You think of initially Clem's house, you then move on the farm, and then you move on to the drugstore and so on. I think like the way that they sort of kept the player on the move, I think it was actually up very well. Obviously it doesn't, in my opinion, stay that way this whole series, but we'll get to that in a later episode. But of course, yeah, you get to the farm and there's just sort of, you got this sense of freedom. There's a lot of air and there's a lot of space, and you can really tell that the characters are thinking, God, like how good it would be we could stay here, because we're going to have an electric fence that protects us from the walkers, we're going to have food and so on. There's just a couple of nice moments here where you're just sort of getting to know the St. John's a little bit. There's a couple of like mini games where you can build the swing ready for Duck and Clem, and I think you can like help with the generator as well, if I remember rightly. And then of course you can fix the perimeter, they ask you, because I think it's like gone down somewhere around the back of the farm, and you can like clear some zombies. So yeah, mate, like I suppose, what do you think about what I said about the pacing at this point, and just like this sort of introduction to the farm as a whole?
Yeah, I loved it. Like, the pacing might maybe lose itself a little bit later on in the episode, but like, straight away when you go to the farm, it's really nice just to have a change of scene. And one thing I want to comment on is the sound, because obviously you've got the sad violin back at the motel where emotions are just really, like you say, like tense. And then you go to this farm where it's kind of happy, and then you've got suddenly like lovely piano music. The sky's blue all of a sudden. You've got lovely like this mum figure in Brenda introducing you, saying, "Oh, have this bread, I'll cook you a meal, bring your group over," and it's like, yeah, and there probably are a lot of people out there who would have been really skeptical, like, why are they all inviting us? Yeah, and then, obviously, yeah, you have that scene with Mark, don't you, where, certainly in my case, he had a go at me not a go at me, a little dig at me for, like, not getting him food earlier. But then, he gets, you're clearing the zombies off, and he gets an arrow in the shoulder, doesn't he? And it's kind of one of the first weird signs with these St. John's that, why are a group of bandits attacking them? They're pretty similar to the guys we saw earlier in, on the trail. And it was just really interesting. You've got the little tractor mini game.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? There's a bit in this again that made me laugh revisiting it. When you're with the tractor, and like there just seems to be like very conveniently placed zombies in the way of this tractor that you have to then sort of like peer out a little bit and grab the zombie. It happens once and it happens twice. Like, how unfortunate must you be that this one little stretch there's 2 zombies in the way just to inconvenience your escape. So yeah, so of course while we've been doing that, I know that Carly and Ben, they went back to the motel, didn't they, to go get the others. But upon your return, you're starting to see the whole group arrive. Obviously Clem and Duck, they sort of spend some time on the swing and all is well. But of course they see that poor Mark has got this massive arrow in his shoulder, and you first hear about the bandits. Now, if I'm honest, I wasn't sceptical of the St. John's. I suppose what my chain of thought was at the time was that ultimately the bandits were going to somehow overwhelm the camp, and then that's what forces you to move on. So you have like this little hope of like peace in this like apocalyptic world, but obviously like bandits force you, but obviously it doesn't play out like that. But of course, yeah, so like Danny says, you know, I think that there's a camp nearby, why don't we go after them? I suppose that's the next moment where you move up with Danny, you've both got rifles, and you stumble upon this camp where you can have a little investigate, look inside the tent. There's like a couple of things like a photo and a stuffed toy, and there's like empty food cans and such.
Most importantly though, you've got Clementine's hat, right?
Of course, yeah, I completely forgot about that. So yeah, you've got Clem's hat in there, and you're thinking, like, how on earth has this got here? And I suppose at the time, I was probably thinking, yeah, like, is it somehow, no, Clem's mum or dad or something like that? Have they got involved in this? But then I was thinking, they're elsewhere, like they're meant to be in, it's Savannah. Like, I don't know what my thoughts were, but a really interesting sequence plays out whereby you see this woman, Jolene, come back, and she starts to threaten you as if to say, I'm going to shoot you in the head, like, leave and such. And you and Danny are like just pointing the gun at her. Now, I don't know about you, mate, I'll just be honest. I wish that I didn't shoot and I kept the conversation going. I'm pretty sure that I was worried about her killing Danny, that I just straight up shot her.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I didn't. I mean, I don't think too much happens, because if you don't shoot her, Danny will anyway.
Yeah.
And the only difference is how you and Danny react to each other. So for me, I was shocked by Danny, and I was like, oh my god, keep your gun away, like, you're terrible. Well, like, I think if you do the killing, Danny looks at you like, oh, nice going, man, and he respects you more. Yeah. But yeah, like, it's funny you mentioned that it could be Clementine's mum, because that's the first thing I thought. She had that kind of long, brown, frizzy hair, similar complexion. Even when she was talking, I was like, oh my god, like, did she take her hat back because it's the mum and she's, like, you know, kind of trying to figure out how she can get her daughter back. And obviously I quickly, like, this conclusion was wiped when, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, she's from Savannah and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It is interesting you mentioned Clementine's mum, because that's the exact thought I had.
Yeah. I don't know why I chose to shoot. I suppose because this is literally the first choice-based game I ever played, that maybe on some level I wasn't expecting to hear more information. I was literally just thinking, you need to make a decision, you need to make it now. Kill her. Obviously, because I've played choice-based games, sometimes it's best to not do anything at all and just let things play out a bit, whether it's to get more information or, you know, X, Y, and Z. So, but yeah, so I straight up killed her. So I didn't have all the dialogue about, you know, I think the only thing she said was, yeah, I'm definitely not going to come back with you. You know, I definitely don't want to come back to that farm. That was it. Like, I think that was the only dialogue I had. So of course, yeah, you get back to the farm, and I suppose the next sequence is where you go into the barn, and you see Katja, Duck, Clem, and Andy. They're all sat round this cow. It's just like a nice atmosphere, and it's good because, and I think this is why this particular dynamic of you being the adult looking after the children works better. Like, I know I prefer season 2 where you play as Clem, like, and you're the kid, but it's really good, like, as the adult seeing the kids. Like, the kids aren't oblivious, but they're not as involved in the story. They're still able to have these quite light moments, like they do with the cow. Like, I suppose the main crux of that bit is, of course, where you see the big door at the back with the heavy lock, and you're thinking, like, what on earth are they keeping behind here? But yeah, mate, you wanted to say something on this, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, like you say, it's a nice, really warm scene here in the barn, and you know, like you get to give the really heartwarming moment where you get to give Clementine her hat back. She's dead happy. She gets to pet a cow. She's really excited about, you know, the possibility of the cow, you know, having, you know, like children or whatever. But yeah, and then obviously there's the best dialogue in the game.
What's this thing?
Daddy said it's called a salt lick.
Yeah, but don't lick it. It's gross.
Did you lick it?
I don't know.
Which, yeah, like, obviously, every Clementine moment, it's not dull, and it further cements, you know, this bond with Lee and Clementine, and us as the viewer as well. Like, you know, Clementine, it could have been where Clementine was a poorly written character, where we just don't feel any affiliation. And yeah, she's like a bit of a responsibility, but it's so important that they made her this really, like, lovable character as well that we can get on board with. And this scene really cemented that for me. I just was at this point, like, nothing wrong can happen with Clementine. I'm totally going to protect her. And yeah, like you say, we get to this barn where Kenny's been missing all sort of like this little section, I guess. And then you finally find him, and he's there at the gate, isn't he? And, you know, after kind of just discussing, yeah, we need to get in, while the dinner bell's finally ringing after like 5 hours of Brenda's cooking. You know, he passes off a little racist comment saying, oh, you can open this, you're urban. You decide to break through this door. And I know, like, at this point, we probably have a few suspicions around the St. John's already, because, you know, there's the whole, why are the bandits coming? What did the lady in the forest mean by saying, I'm not going back to the camp? Why are they being so accommodating? Why do they need an electric fence? And this is just, it cements it even further. You're like, okay, what are they hiding in? And especially while Andy's saying, oh, don't go in there. So it makes you suspicious. I wasn't really a fan of opening the door. I still was very much in that camp where, like, now we need to be respectful here. Yeah. Let's not tinker with anything. So I didn't quite like the fact that I had to go through with it anyway. But yeah, there's a little bit of a distraction puzzle with the generator that you have to go through. And yeah, behold, you open the door while everyone leaves for dinner. And I'll leave it for you, Jack. What do we see?
Yeah, of course. So when you open the door, obviously there's loads of blood all over the walls. There's what I can only assume is some sort of like machinery, and I don't know. All I'd say at this bit was that that's Bella, is that Kenny's excuse was absolutely terrible. He says to you, like, oh yeah, mate, I'll make it work. I'll, like, delay for you, you know, so that you can get in there and have a look around. Lo and behold, like, Andy's, like, just immediately there over your shoulder. I think he quickly says, oh, you know, it's for animals or something like that, and tries to diffuse it. Why there's sort of like a massive lock on the door, I don't know. Why not just tell people from the get-go? You know, why did you have to hide that information? So I suppose, yeah, at that point, like, suspicions are starting to rise with regards to the St. John's. I think that the sequence coming up is probably the most iconic scene of the series. I don't know if you agree with that, mate.
Yeah, I mean, one of them. Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? Everyone's sat there at dinner. You're there, you know, you're told to wash your hands. And I quite like this because everyone's finally together at once. And yeah, you go upstairs and there's like, you know, you sneak up there because you're like, why is Mark, like, been gone this whole game? And it is true. You do start getting suspicious, don't you? Like, Mark's been gone for ages. He's only got like an arrow in the shoulder.
Yeah.
And yeah, you find the light behind the wall, and it's just dead interesting because you open it up and there he is, like, Mark legless on the floor saying brothers. And, like, you know, it's at this point you clock on, you're like, there, his legs have been cut off. He's the meat for the meal tonight. And, you know, a few thoughts raced in my brain. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. The first one is every zombie film or book or series has to have a cannibalism story at some point, and it didn't take long for them to jump on that. They got it done in episode 2.
Yeah.
The second one was it like, did Mark really warrant getting his legs chopped off when he had one arrow in the shoulder, which seems pretty treatable if I'm not gonna, if I'm being pretty honest. I'm like, did they not just have some spare steaks left over they could have used? But yeah, and I really like this bit where you run down the stairs to stop Clementine from eating the meat. I'll jump onto you, mate. Any comments about that whole Mark section?
Oh, absolutely loved it. From the fact that Lee gives an excuse to go to the bathroom, you then creep up the stairs, and you have the little bit where you've got to fit the power cord in, and that's what makes you see the light, and sort of like the inner child in you, sort of like with all that sort of hidden passageways and things. Yeah, really good. And obviously it's seeing Mark, and it's such a shame that it is Mark, because like I said at the top of the episode, I really like his character, very level-headed, like a reliable ally in this world. But I suppose at the same time, that's exactly why he had to get killed off in a way, to sort of help Lee's development and make him sort of like the big man to sort of like make the decisions and such. Of course, yeah.
Here's a random opinion I've just had, actually. I wonder if it would have been better to have not had Glenn in the game, since he's got to go in the TV show, and then have Mark in Glenn's place from the get-go.
Yeah.
So you've got more of an existing relationship with Mark, and then it becomes all the more gutting when you see like your best mate who's had your back, pretty much like one of the first ones, other than Doug in our case, to die off in the group. And I thought that could have been really painful, because it almost wasn't too hitting for me that we only just met Mark, but it would have been even more powerful if he was there in episode 1.
You know what? That's so true, because like we've met a lot of characters very quickly so far in this game. Would it have hurt to sort of like keep a couple back, or like you say, bring him in earlier? Like, yeah, I've been really on board for that, and it probably would have hit home a lot more. But of course, yeah, it obviously then gets very tense, and the St. Johns are sat there saying this could have been so much easier for you. Which, I don't know about you, mate, would you look at that as in they were always gonna kill everyone one by one, eat them? Or do you look at that as, because you found that out, we're now gonna have to kill you and eat you? Like, do you reckon they would have carried the actions out regardless?
It's a bit of an odd one, because I would have said the latter, because it's like, yeah, you found out, so now, and you're against it, the idea of cannibalism, so clearly we can't keep you. But the way Mark got one arrow in the shoulder, and they were like, oh, food, makes me think that, yeah, like, all it would have taken is, like, Duck stubbing his toe outside on the swings, and then they would have brought him in, patched him up, and like butchered his leg off. So yeah, to be honest, probably a bit of both, if I'm being honest, mate.
Right, okay. Because yeah, there was moments I was thinking, wait, so if he hadn't have been found, would that have been the case? But then at the same time, there's all that blood elsewhere. I'm thinking, no, they just get their kicks off this sort of thing. But anyway, so yeah, obviously Lee then gets knocked out with the butt of a rifle, and you then wake up in one of the back rooms of the barn, and I think it's Lee, Clem, Larry, Lily and Kenny. So Catcher and Duck have been taken by the St. Johns elsewhere. And let's just get to the main point of this bit, mate. Larry has a heart attack and dies, or at least he might have died, he might not have died. We then have a choice, given Ben's revelation earlier, that it doesn't matter whether it's a bite or not, as soon as you die, that's it, you're turning. And Kenny makes the point, we're going to have like a 6 foot, 300 pound walker in a minute if we don't do anything. So, did you cave Larry's head in?
So I'll explain what I did, and I'll give a bit of context to why as well. So I didn't. I was with Lily here. I was like, we can still save him, and I tried the CPR, which Kenny drops the salt lick on his face anyway. Now, the reason I went to spare Larry here is that, I just think it was a bit of a... I mean, I get why people would have done it. I know there's the whole thing, you have to stick with Kenny. But it's just straight up murder, and it was kind of I couldn't bring myself to do it. But also, Larry, for like the past half an hour or hour, gets a little bit of a sympathy context. You can speak out in the gazebo a little bit, and Lily's like, look, he's gone through a lot. There's a reason he's the way he is. He's just being protective over me, honestly. And also, you see him with Brenda, like flirting a little bit, and then Brenda says, "Oh, the times like this bring out the worst in people." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? Yeah, like I'm not saying. I mean, Larry still is a horrible person, but I don't think he warranted murder." So yeah, I was straight on there to do CPR, mate. I was Team Lily at this point, if I'm being honest. How about yourself?
I straight up dropped it on his head.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, tell me why, mate. We got a bit of a difference here.
If I'm learning anything about myself, like early doors in these choice-based games, I was fucking ruthless. But so I don't know. I just looked at it and I was thinking, you know what, Kenny makes a very good point. Potentially, he could then infect someone else, and obviously, like I said, this was my first choice-based game, so I was like, well, you know what? He's been a bit of a dick to me as well. I know it doesn't warrant murder, but it's a cutthroat world. Sorry, Larry, but that's what had to be done. So yeah,
I think as well, I forgot to say, I don't think I could also bring myself to have done that in front of his own daughter as well, and also Clementine being in the room. I was a little like, I can't have Clem witness that. I gotta be a hero here. But yeah, like, oh my god, yeah. What a tense scene. It comes out of nowhere, and also, I really like the idea of this writing, because Larry, who's supposed to be this big antagonist, I had these visions of him making it all the way to episode 4, wherever that might take us at this point. But nah, episode 2, the biggest villain we have so far, a salt lick just gets dropped on his face, and it comes out of nowhere. The fact that you're still doing the CPR, and on the side of your screen, splat. I thought that was so powerful, and I really like some of the moments in this episode, that being the main one, actually, mate.
No, it really was an excellent scene, and of course, Lily's absolutely distraught, and but then Lee has to almost like switch himself back on and think how we're going to get out of here. So, cut a long story short, they use sort of the ventilation unit, and I think Clem climbs through and opens the door.
Yeah, I mean, on the build-up, I must say that there's the section where you're in like the meat, kind of all like the butcher room, if it were, where you feel really bad, don't you, for like putting Clem through there, but it's your only option. But then this is where Kenny really goes off the rails, doesn't he? Because he's just like, now I need to find my wife and son. And Kenny's writing's brilliant, isn't he? Because he's like such a, he cares for his family, but that's almost his downfall. Because if his family's in jeopardy, he puts you at risk. And, which is true. Like, a lot of people would do the same thing. And obviously, I sided against him. And he was straight out the door. He was having a go at me. He was like, I'm getting my wife. And he was like, fuck you, Lee. He was gone, But yeah, obviously, there's this whole Danny thing. And I think the jump scare was done really well for me. And I actually died first time here. Because, you see us back there. I looked at a second time, he was gone. And then I looked at a third time, and the gun was aimed right down my face. And I got shot. Because, the jump scare almost took me back. But yeah, obviously, I avoided it, did the tussle, was in a position to kill him. And I don't think I did. I think, again, I was like, Clem's here. I don't want to kill him. How about you?
I killed him again.
Oh, mate, it was so different.
No, seriously, I was like, it's dog eat dog in this world. You were willing to eat my mate. And ultimately probably go for all of us as well. So, yeah, the opportunity presented itself. I was like, no loose ends. Killed him.
Well, fair play. That is so interesting that we've done different things there. I like it. But yeah, obviously, so another thing here, when you go outside to find Kenny, you're like, where the hell's Kenny gone? And you try and rescue the, catcher and duck or whatever, get everyone else off this freak show of a farm. It's at this point that Carly and Ben show back up. Now, here's another interesting fact. If you save Doug, he aims a laser pen at you.
Oh, right.
And you get like a laser in the face, and then, you find out he's coming based off of him signaling you. Just another little fun thing that, I feel a lot of people would have picked Carly over Doug for reasons like I said. But yeah, just a few cool things that, warrant you picking Doug, which I really like.
Oh, that's so good actually. Like, you know what? I'm starting to sort of wish that I didn't pick Carly and I picked Doug because, I'm quite liking like these little moments that I'm just imagining them in my head. But oh yeah, and I mean, obviously going on from here, you then make your way up to the house, don't you? And I really like this bit. You sort of play around with the lighting quite a bit. I can't remember if it's like the lighting in the house or whether it's thunder and lightning outside, but Brenda, she's got hold of Katja, I believe, or is it Duck? It's one of the two, and she's it's Katja, yeah. And she's sort of saying, "Don't take another step closer, Lee," and you sort of take a step closer, and you have a bit of dialogue, and she's slowly going upstairs, and then you can see, because of the lighting, you can see Zombie Mark like at the top. And that's obviously the game you've got to play. You've got to like slowly just keep her going up the stairs so that she gets attacked.
Yeah, I love this whole sequence. Like you say, the lighting's brilliant. At first, because I had my screen quite dark, you think it might be like a random bit of rag. And then, yeah, the lighting comes on and then you get closer and you're like, oh my god, that's Mark. Quite ironic as well that the person who butchered, Mark gets killed by Mark. So kind of a little bit of beauty in that, I find.
Yeah, a bit of poetic justice. But yeah, sort of Mark, or Brenda rather, got her comeuppance. So yeah, that's her off basically. And then of course we go outside and encounter Andy, who I sort of viewed as like the main one, the St. John's. Obviously you revealed to him, well, at least in my playthrough anyway, I said, look, Annie's dead. Brenda's dead, it's just you. And of course it then like breaks out into a fight, and it's really cool. You have this moment where it switches to first person and you're like beating him up, sort of smacking his face. And I mean, at least for me, Lee started to walk away, and this guy was absolutely like battered and bruised, and he just like started taunting me. And my ruthless edge came out once again, because there was like a little quick cut towards the electric fence, and I was thinking, I think I know what they want me to do here. And ended up like frying the guy's brains, like just straight up put him into the electric fence. And that was sort of a very, very brutal way to end Andy in this game. So yeah, like, I was absolutely savage in this episode, mate.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one cool thing for me, because obviously Lily was in, I was in her good books. She said, "Yeah, we're cool, Lee," because she liked the fact that I tried to help and save her dad. That when Andy's pushing my face towards the electric fence, she actually comes out of a rifle and shoots Andy, which saves you and prompts you to, do the punching on the ground, which is pretty cool. So Lily saves you in that sense. But yeah, I like punched his face like multiple times to the point, if you hit the left side of his face lots, he'll get like a kind of a droopy face on one side, which I thought was a little cool detail. And again, like you've got the ruthlessness nature, I've got the sparing nature. I spared him, and he was taunting me, but I think what did it for me was a combo of like maybe Clementine and Carly looking at me like, "Come on, Lee, let's go," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right." But also, I think as well, like, there's the whole Lee's backstory about how he murdered a man. And I thought there was kind of a beauty in kind of thinking, yeah, like, I'm a different person now. This is my second chance, like we mentioned in the last episode. And I kind of wanted to go along with the writing of that and go, yeah, this is my second chance. I'm going to be a better person. Although it was difficult, because there was that part of me that remembered Andy pulling Clementine's hair. And I was like, how fucking dare you? I will kill you first moment I get at that dinner table. So yeah, it was mixed emotions. One thing I want to say here as well is that I just thought it was beautiful how this farm started off as this really sunny place with piano music, and then the sad violins kick back in and you have this really epic stormy green sky in the background, and it's kind of like the chaos matches with the music and the weather. And I just thought the whole kind of design of the St. John Dairy was done really brilliantly, as you've kind of destroyed this group. And, you go away as it's like storming with rain, and then, the zombies and zombie Brenda kind of take over this farm. But, it's pretty sad to mention, like, obviously I would have spared Andy and Danny at this point, but, they would have got eaten by the zombies anyway. as well as the cow, which is really sad to think about.
Yeah, you know what? And thinking about like your ending, I think like from a writing point of view, it makes more sense. But you could argue as well that, in fact, maybe leaving him alive is that sort of it's even worse because he's then got to like live on his own or whatever. Sort of like with the knowledge that sort of like Brenda's dead and maybe Danny's dead or whatever, and he's just like there, like he's lost his home, he's lost everything. Walkers are everywhere. But no, and completely agree about just the tone and the atmosphere that the Telltale developers did here. Really good scene. It's gone from day to night. It's gone from sunny to stormy, and just that whole transition to getting there from trusting the St. John's, then killing them. Obviously, in my case, the parallels were just handled really beautifully in this episode. So me personally, I would have ended the episode there, but we're not done yet because we have a little sequence after, don't we? A little epilogue, if you will, where yourself, Lee, and the group are walking presumably back to the motel or to some other safe haven, and you come across a car with a load of goodies in it and supplies. We have our final choice of the game as to whether you take the supplies or not. So, mate, what did you do?
I probably leaned towards the bad side at this point. I was like, you know what? I've been sparing people all game. I'm taking the supplies. I think I did this as well because I was thinking, you know what? Like, I know it is harsh. It could be someone else's. But it could be someone else's who's gone out and is just died, which is why the car's abandoned. So I thought, this food's going to waste. Also, if they left food like that, kind of shame on them. It's susceptible to getting stolen. Clementine was very much against it, so it was a tricky decision to make. But I was like, you know what? Like, we do have to somewhat look out for the group. Like you say, this is a dog-eat-dog world, and I've been very kind, sitting on the fence, being kind of the angel, but that is only probably going to get you killed in a realistic world. So I was like, you know what? Now we have to, steal the food and supplies here, and got, Clementine a new hoodie and whatnot. How about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I took the supplies as well. I suppose my logic was, the car it's abandoned for a reason. Obviously they've met some other threat that they had to get away from. Is it likely they're going to come back to the car? You've got a lot of people there. The episode title is called Starved for Help, and I think that's obviously a prominent theme. So it just felt of a more fitting end. I know in the playthrough that I watched, the person did the opposite. They chose not to take the supplies, but I think Kenny and the group decided to take supplies anyway. And Lee says, like, me and Clem will have no part of this in terms of like the supplies. So I think either way, the group takes some.
That's it, yeah. And it's interesting because there's a bit of dialogue on the walk as well, and like obviously Kenny being Kenny hates my guts. We completely fell out at this point because I didn't help him with the salt lick. So, I know they say side with Kenny always, but we were mortal enemies at this point. And then obviously Carly finds batteries, which you have a little joke with her about, and then you open up this camcorder for the ending of the game, don't you?
That's right, yeah. And I genuinely, even to this day, I'm still a little bit, because it's been so long since I played this, still a little bit unsure of what it was. Like, obviously, clearly, this woman was watching the group, and she has this thing for Clem where she feels compelled to save her, and it comes back to my whole thing of like, is it the mum? And then I was just so confused, and I remember at the time thinking, I really wonder where the story's going to go from here, because if this is somehow Clem's mum and you're playing as Lee, like, how does that dynamic work out? Could Clem ultimately stay with Lee and then not be with her mum? Like, there was just so many questions come the end of that. Don't know about you.
I think I might have been a little confused because 16-year-old me wasn't very bright, but also like I look at it now and I kind of think, oh, it showed that someone was watching you the whole time, which is just a bit of a creepy element. There was an element of, oh, okay, so she was kind of like with the bandits maybe, or like kind of like hostage by the bandits, I'm unsure. But that she had a bit of a running with the St. John's, and it's kind of like, the writing was on the wall the whole time that these St. John's were bad. But also, I think it just kind of really underlines kind of what is the theme of the Walking Dead TV show as well, which is that other humans are a bigger threat than walkers. So it kind of was like just a big thing to say, yeah, watch out for other people. Other humans aren't your friends. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there now. People can backstab you. And this was a perfect example of, what this game did for us, because straight away, you come across other humans. We're there trying to save them, bringing them back to the camp to give them supplies, heal them up. We're going to their farm to do trades with them. And you come into episode 2 thinking, oh, great, other people. And you kind of come out of it thinking that our group are our group, and we need to really look out for each other. And then, I think after this episode, you almost have a hostile nature towards strangers, or at least a skeptical one. I don't know if that's accurate for you, mate.
No, yeah, and honestly, like some of the themes, because obviously, like this whole theme of season 1, it's about survival, isn't it? And I think that what you've touched on there is like such like a major part of it, because in an ideal world, in a utopian world, it really would be about people banding together, looking out for one another. But I think that very primitive human instinct, that herd mentality, comes in where you are distrusting and you do become a bit more secular. You look after your own, and then that's obviously what sort of like creates sort of the conflict and character drama throughout the entire series. So yeah, no, really good point, mate. And obviously that signals the end of episode 2.
Right, yeah, so, I mean, really strong episode, from, like I say, Larry dying, to the music, the design of the farm, to the Kenny versus Lily dynamic, which is only heating up and will get even more heated in the next episode. Yeah, just thank you for joining us, guys. Join us next week for Long Road Ahead, the train episode. Yeah, Jack, anything to mention?
Yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.
Thank you very much, guys. See you soon.
Get the fuck out of here!